What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here with Player Profiler. Back today with week 8 finally over, week 9 finally over as well. We're getting ready to move on to week number 10. Super excited to be here with you guys to talk about my biggest takeaways from last week that I think will help us as we navigate the waters. We're coming up close to the playoffs, and this is super important to make sure that we're still paying attention, right? While our league mates are starting to fall asleep at the wheel, you have some teams that maybe are only a couple of games out of from 500 and they've kind of thrown in the towel, and it's going to allow, you know, managers and owners that are keeping themselves sharp and up to date to kind of stack some easier wins. And you can do that just by being active, just by making sure that you're paying attention to the right things. And if you have paid attention to some of what we've talked about on this show on a weekly basis, we have gotten some things right, we've gotten some things wrong. We're going to talk about some of those things today, as we kind of progress and again start to kind of look out and see what does the rest of the season look like. How can we take advantage of certain situations, and are there certain situations where we're kind of like, hey, we have enough information here to kind of get a grasp of what the rest of the season should look like. My name is Peter Nova. You can find me on Twitter at supernova38. I'm here on Mondays every single week, bringing you fantasy content. Super excited to be here with you guys. Let's kick in. And again, as always, for these shows, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in a mailbag and I will get to them at the end of the episode. But let's go ahead and move on to our first takeaway. And Kyle Williams should start to get on your radar just a little bit. I say this for more of deeper leagues. So if you're not in a 12-man or larger league, Kyle Williams probably is not going to be a player that's important to you. But those that are playing in, deeper leagues, deeper benches with more owners in your leagues, Kyle Williams should be on your radar. This is a guy that was the 5th pick in the 3rd round for the New England Patriots this season. He is a rookie and he has started off slow, but Kayshon Boutte, who, has kind of been up and down for the New England Patriots, has scored a lot of touchdowns for them and has been reliable in that regard, but hasn't been a huge volume target. He is day to day with a hamstring injury. And when you hear hamstring for wide receivers, it's never really a great sign. He did leave the game early, and Kayshon Boutte's injury, is something that we need to keep in mind as it opens up a pathway for Kyle Williams, who was a higher touted draft pick. Now we've seen this staff not always give younger players the best chance to succeed. But in this situation, I think Kyle Williams thrusts into mainly that X position. He played a career high of 31 snaps, 45.6% of the Patriots offensive snaps this past week with Boutte going down. So Kyle Williams should be somebody you keep in mind, right? This is a player that, got a lot of hype in the offseason. He was drafted in Dynasty late 2nd round, sometimes in the 3rd round, especially depending on when you were drafting. There were times he was slipping really, really far. If you draft on Sleeper, you remember the ADP was really all out of whack in rookie offseason to start. And Kyle Williams, there was a league where he went in the 4th, 5th round in a couple of mine. So just keep in mind, Kyle Williams, you got to take note of 37% college dominator rating per Player Profiler. He's a player that could absolutely be given more opportunities to kind of shine here. And, besides Stephon Diggs, there's really not a high target earner in this offense right now. So he should be a guy that's in your radar, especially in deeper formats. Let's move over to our number 2 takeaway. And we talked in the beginning of the show when we kicked off that, we would talk about some things that we got right. So far, it's only 1 week of sample size. But if you listened to me last week, I mentioned Devin Singletary as a player to monitor and pick up, especially if you're in leagues where you don't expect that you're going to get Tracy. You shouldn't let Devin Singletary fall through the cracks. He's still not rostered in a ton of leagues right now. And the split was pretty much what I had anticipated, close to a 50-50 split. And Singletary ended up taking more offensive snaps than Tyrone Tracy this past week. Devin Singletary outsnapped Tracy 56 to 44%. We shared last week, Brian Daboll has this kind of loyalty to Devin Singletary. So it's not super surprising that Devin Singletary, is getting touches and getting looks and opportunities in this offense. Tyrone Tracy, the biggest concern with Tracy is not a lot of draft capital invested in him. They bring in Scadaboo. Scadaboo wins the job, in my opinion. In camp, he was going to be the guy. I thought, coming out of camp, it would have been like a 50-50 split. Scadaboo starts off a little slow because of the injury, and then pretty much, the rest is history. He takes over the role, and then, of course, the injury. But Tyrone Tracy has a fumbling issue, too, and that's something that is a concern. And I could see this being a situation where, Tracy has struggled with ball security, and I could see him continue to do so. And it shifts more and more to Devin Singletary. And also, let's talk about the pass protection. Tyrone Tracy did not look good in pass protection this past week. It's something that he has struggled with in the past, and that's not going to get him on the field, especially when you have a guy next to him and Devin Singletary. Where look, it's a really gross name. It's not sexy. We said that last week. It's not sexy, but for whatever reason, he's a veteran that Brian Daboll trusts and respects, and so we'll see how that shakes out. But Tyrone Tracy, 5 rushes, 18 yards. He also caught 3 catches for 19 on 4 targets. And Singletary, though, 8 rushes, 43 yards. So much more efficient day for him. He also caught 2 passes for 8 yards. Bears on tap this week, 25th in points allowed to the running back position. Devin Singletary could be an interesting flyer. I'm sure in deeper leagues, you're probably playing either of these guys if you have them, just because of the matchup. But Devin Singletary is definitely a guy that you should be adding in your leagues if he's available. And he is available in 50% of leagues right now. Let's go ahead and move on to our third takeaway here. And it's Loveland's in the air, right? Colston Loveland, Bears tight end, gets drafted ahead of Tyler Warren, and Tyler Warren starts the season off way hotter. Tyler Warren has less competition for targets than Colston Loveland, and also Colston Loveland has to deal with Cole Kmet. Colston Loveland had the injury coming into the offseason with the shoulder, and so you figured a little bit of a slower ramp-up time for him, and that's what's kind of happened, right? Tyler Warren took the reins. It's been awesome to start the year. Colston Loveland started off a little bit slow, splitting out the time and the snaps with Cole Kmet. We see Cole Kmet go down, and Colston Loveland ended up dominating the snaps in the last 2 weeks, 81% of the snaps. He has a great day with a 58-yard touchdown to seal it for the Bengals to take the lead to win that game, which against the Bengals, which was awesome to see for him. 6 receptions on 7 targets, 118 yards, 2 total touchdowns, and 18.9% target share for Colston Loveland. It's starting to look like Colston Loveland is a player that can kind of open up the offense, which is what a lot of people expected. And with Ben Johnson, I know people kind of talked about the Sam Laporta thing, and I didn't necessarily agree with the comp completely with how, Sam Laporta had such a great rookie season. I still think Laporta had way more competition. Laporta had way less competition than Colston Loveland has this year. But it's also something to monitor here. Cole Kmet, just 26% of the snaps coming back from the injury in this game. But even before that, Loveland outsnapped him the prior game before he got injured. So that's something to monitor and something to note. Colston Loveland looks like he may have carved himself out more of a role in this offense. So it's really good to see that for Colston Loveland, especially you dynasty managers that have been holding him. If you've been stashing him in redraft, maybe finally pops here. We'll see. He does get the New York Giants this next week. So that's a solid matchup. So we'll see if he can kind of stack back-to-back good weeks together. And we'll see where we have him in the rankings. And speaking of the rankings, if you have not already, you should be taking advantage of Player Profiler's rankings that we have here on PlayerProfiler.com. I can't speak today. I'll let the Podfather go ahead and do the talking.
People say, oh, there's so much free on Player Profiler. What's in the premium package? Well, it starts with the player rankings. We have the best process for ranking and projecting players, not just seasonal leagues, though. We're talking about tight end premium, specifically FFPC, best ball, specifically underdog, including their superflex rankings. And then we have IDP rankings, dynasty rankings, rookie rankings, Scott Fishbowl rankings, offensive line rankings by Dan Fornick, cornerback rankings throughout the season where you can see who's matched up with who. It's incredible. And think about who's contributed to our processes over time. Math majors, analytics powerhouses, plus you get the contributions from the real football guys. Billy Muzio, Dan Williamson, Bradley Stalder. That's why our rankings are the best. And if you want to upgrade and go all in, use promo code Underworld or your host promo code, and you get $25 off.
Yeah, and I've loved the player profiler rankings. I love being able to see the ceiling part of the rankings. You get to kind of get a look and see what the highest ceiling they project them to hit. So sometimes it makes you kind of hit those starts where you're kind of like, what's the ceiling for this player? I'm down points, I'm chasing points, and that's a really nice feature that Player Profiler has on the website. Let's go ahead and move over to number 4 here, and it's Puka Nacua's injuries. This is becoming a theme, and Puka Nacua leaves the game this past week with a chest/rib sprain/pull. He sustained it in the third quarter of Week 9's matchup against the Saints. The team appears to be optimistic that he's not going to miss time. That the reports and the scans came back negative, so no fractures, no breaks, which is a really good sign. But it's starting to become, and it has already, maybe it already was, a theme with Puka Nacua with these injuries. Let's go back in time a little bit here. In 2023, in December, he had the chest rib sprain/pull, so same injury. He also had a shoulder AC joint sprain in that season. Then in 2024, in August, he had an unspecified knee tear. And he was hurt during training camp, but he did suit up for Week 1, right? But then, after Week 1, he ends up missing 5 games because he ends up with a knee PCL sprain. He gets placed on IR on September 9th, misses 5 games, right? And the rest there, right? Then this year, right, we have October 12th in that Ravens game during Week 6. He ends up having that ankle injury, only ends up missing 1 game, which is great to see. I mean, that was a little nerve-wracking when you see him go down, but now we have another injury, right, where he leaves the game early in this one. Thankfully for fantasy managers, it doesn't matter. He still crushed it in both games that he left early. But it's becoming a habit with Puka Nacua, and it's frustrating if you own him. This is why I've advocated for Devontae Adams as a player that, look, it's hard. You're probably buying Adams high, and that's okay. But you're buying a guy like Adams high who doesn't miss time. And if Puka Nacua misses time, we saw him score 3 touchdowns in the game that Puka Nacua was gone. And I mean, doesn't take a genius to tell you that Devontae Adams is going to be a huge focal point in that offense if Puka Nacua misses time. I don't expect this injury to make him miss any time, but the point is, this is a player that plays with reckless abandonment and is like a car crash going into every single play. He plays super hard, and while you love players that go out there and show out like that, and you want players like that on your team, his body has tended to not really hold up. And so you're hopeful that he can get to this season healthy. But I would still, again, keep checking in on Devontae Adams, the owners that have him, even if you got to pay a little bit of a premium for him, because no one's going to give him up for cheap. I'm still putting him on my radar. Still think Devontae Adams is a top 15, possibly a top 12 guy, rest of the season. So something to monitor, something to keep in mind. Moving on to number 5, and it's Drake Maye's Dynasty check. It's a good time to kind of take a look at this point of where Drake Maye is valued at the moment. Keep in mind, Drake Maye, dynasty-wise, was being drafted in startups this year as around the quarterback 9, right? Right around that Justin Herbert area, right before Bo Nix, like kind of Caleb Williams-y area. Like that's kind of the cluster that we were seeing. And honestly, Patrick Mahomes was right around there too. Now, we're seeing him have a great year, quarterback 3 on the year, MVP candidate. 6 of 9 games for Drake Maye, he's had 20 or more points. He's only had one game below 16, and he's quarterback 3 right now on keep trade cut. So right now the market values Drake Maye as the quarterback 3 in Dynasty. So how quickly things change, right? You coming into the year, it was Josh Allen / Jayden Daniels for that number 1 quarterback spot, but they were pretty much respectively 1 and 2. Then you had Lamar Jackson at 3, Joe Burrow at 4, Jalen Hurts at 5. Then, somewhere around Mahomes and Herbert at 6 and 7, right? That was typically what it was, kind of the flow of kind of where people were ranking and getting taken on an ADP standpoint for startups for quarterbacks. But just how quickly things change. And I got to be honest with you, I would rather have Drake Maye in Dynasty over Jayden Daniels. You look at Jayden Daniels, and we're gonna get into Daniels a little bit in a moment here, but the environment around Drake Maye is much more conducive to long-term success. They invested in that offensive line, and that offensive line has turned it around drastically. They have a young coach who's going to be there for a very long time. Job security for Mike Vrabel is not something that needs to be worried about, even if he has a down year or two. I don't expect him to go anywhere. And he's established a great culture there. You look at Josh McDaniels, who, for the amount of crap that Josh McDaniels gets thrown at him, he's a piece of garbage human being, maybe, but he's an awesome, offensive coordinator and a savant when it comes to just dialing up plays and putting his players in good positions to succeed. So I trust the situation for Drake Maye much more. Kyle Williams was a nice addition. Stephon Diggs is on contract for another, I think, year or two. Pop Douglas is still a solid piece there. Hunter Henry, they just brought in Trevion Henderson. Stevenson's still there. Like, there's a lot of good pieces here that are going to be here for a while. And so I trust Drake Maye's development more. He's also been able to stay healthier, and he still runs, right? He still runs, but he's taking care of himself when it comes to not taking the big hits, like we've seen with Jayden Daniels. So, Drake Maye, that's a nice spot to be in if you have him in Dynasty right now. Let's move over to number 6 here, and it's the Bears backfield. Kyle Monangai, I mean, it's really hard to put the toothpaste back inside the tube. And I didn't come up with that on my own. One of our guys on the back end, John Adams, who helps me out, gave me the title for that. And I think it's a great analogy and just the truth, right? I mean, when you think about the Bears offense and that running back room, that's always been the talk, right? They were in the draft. They wanted Trevion Henderson, reports were, and Henderson gets picked one spot ahead of him. So they go Luther Burden. They wanted other running backs in the draft, and they just kept getting sniped. And Kyle Monangai falls into their lap, right? And they take him out of Rutgers, and not a guy that you're projecting to be a long-term starter, maybe a special teams contributor at that point in the draft, where you take him in a loaded running back class. And DeAndre Swift, you say, all right, Swift's going to be the lead back. Maybe Roschon Johnson, who even know he's hurt. Wasn't even getting chances when he was healthy, right? Kyle Monangai comes out though in his first opportunity to be the full starter. 26 carries, 176 yards, 3 catches on 5 targets for 22 yards. This is a guy that runs hard, provides the Bears a toughness on that offense that doesn't really have many players that you can sit there and say that, yeah, they're giving a tough edge to this team. So Monangai provides something that's been missing, an identity, right? You think about Josh Jacobs, and what makes him so good for the Packers is when it gets cold and we get to late December, outside, outdoors, they lean on him, right, to pound the rock. And Kyle Monangai could see himself in a carved out role now. He should be in a carved out role now, where this team can lean on him to pound the football and to set a tone to help get them to the playoffs. Right now, playoffs are very real for the Chicago Bears at the moment. And when we take a little bit of a closer look, right, people said, "Oh, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, that's the comp, that's the comp." And it's such a lazy, tired comp. I'm so tired of hearing the David Montgomery and the DeAndre and Jahmyr Gibbs, right? But people said, well, DeAndre Swift and Monangai, he's there with Ben Johnson now. He's from Detroit. It makes sense. And Monangai is much closer to David Montgomery than Swift is to than to Jahmyr Gibbs. And so, when you look at it, it's just the Bengals. I get it, but he's looked good on limited touches prior. And this is a performance from Kyle Monangai that would be the best performance of DeAndre Swift's entire career. DeAndre Swift, talented player. There are some deficiencies in his game, and he's also has had issues staying healthy in the past a little bit. But I mean, ultimately, we're going to look back on Swift as always a player of what could have been, unfortunately. And Kyle Monangai, could possibly, stalwart that breakout that we were hoping and kind of seeing a little bit with DeAndre Swift. To me, I think you have to give Kyle Monangai more touches. This could be a very frustrating backfield. I don't think it's, hey, this is Kyle Monangai's job, but DeAndre Swift could also miss some more time, right? The reason he missed this week is from a lingering groin injury, is what they're calling it. But I think it's really, I think it could be, somebody knocked. I mean, somebody wasn't wearing his cup in games, maybe enough. That's what I saw. That could be completely wrong. But the point is, it obviously hasn't been getting better. That's why they sat him down. And when you see how well he played, you sit there and say to yourself, well, maybe Swift can sit another week, gives us a chance to see Monangai in a more full-time role, right? Gets Swift healthy with one extra week. We don't have to rush him back. So we'll see. But 2 bottom 10 units in the next 4 weeks for the Chicago Bears. So there are some plus matchups coming up. And so, yeah, if you started Kyle Monangai, good for you, because that was a really, really smash play. Let's go ahead and move over to the next takeaway here, and it's the Vikings backfield. We got to talk about them a little bit. Aaron Jones, 89 yards total in the first half, 69 rushing, 20 receiving on 9 total touches. He gained an average of 9.9 yards, right? I mean, Aaron Jones looked great. And I think it's safe to say Aaron Jones is the lead back. And that's not to be hyperbolic. We don't want to overreact on a week by week basis that this guy's the lead back now, this guy's the lead back now, this guy's the lead back now. But when you think about Aaron Jones and the fact that he's a leader on this team, he's a veteran, he's been in this offense, they know him, and they feel comfortable with him. And so as long as Aaron Jones is healthy, I think he's going to be that lead guy. Now, Jordan Mason ends up out snapping him this week, but it's only sheerly off the fact that, that Aaron Jones left the game early, right? Jordan Mason got out snapped by Aaron Jones in Jones's first game back with the Minnesota Vikings. So I just when you look at it, I would be confident in Aaron Jones to be the starter. It's just a matter of can he stay healthy. When you look at Jordan Mason, he's really a guy that you should have sold if you didn't already. You're probably holding, and just off the fact alone that you think maybe there's a possibility Jones could miss time, but it appears he did not suffer a major injury. I think I read AC joint sprain. It's probably the best diagnosis he could have gotten. But he's also a player that's dealt with injury history in the past. So you're probably holding Jordan Mason at this point, just off the sheer fact that he's behind an older veteran that's tends to get injured. But Aaron Jones could be a guy that you could maybe get for really cheap from a dynasty owner. If you're a contender, that maybe a dynasty owner is sitting there and they're saying to themselves, man, I waited all this time to get this player back. He comes back 2 weeks and now he's hurt again. Is he going to miss time? Like, those are some moves that you might be willing to make. You could possibly get Aaron Jones for a 3rd round pick, right? If it's a team that doesn't think that they can contend, but you think you can. So those are things to monitor and keep in mind. But to me, Jordan Mason is no better than a low end RB2 if Aaron Jones misses any time. And I hope that you could have sold Jordan Mason, before this, because I think his stock is low. Now, maybe it bumps a little bit up if Aaron Jones misses some time. Now, let's go ahead and move on to number 8, and it's projecting Daniels. Let's talk about Jayden Daniels a little bit. We talked about Drake Maye. We talked about Jayden Daniels a little bit before, and I think it's important to kind of do a little bit of a pulse check here on Jayden Daniels. Suffers that elbow injury on the non-throwing arm against the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday night. Really, really tough to see with Jayden Daniels. I gotta be honest, this is a real chance that he does not come back this year. And I say that because this is a team right now who is losing more and more ground in the NFC picture, which is the much stronger conference right now with records and everything else. And why rush Jayden Daniels back, your young quarterback, if they're going to be out of the picture possibly, right? That's a very real possibility over the next 4 weeks. Marcus Mariota is a solid backup. So they have a good, a player to stick in there with Daniels' timeout. But if they don't run the table here a little bit, I don't think Jayden Daniels comes back. And let's talk about Daniels from a dynasty perspective. Jayden Daniels was, the QB/1-2 in startups. Right now, he's being valued behind Drake Maye as a quarterback 4. And I think that's fair right now. Jayden Daniels has dealt with some injuries. And when you look at both of these quarterbacks, one is in a much better conducive environment than the other. I also, I mean, the Commanders tried to push the chips in the table this year and thought they were a contender, but this roster is just not very good. It's old. They only have 2 of their first 4 round picks next year. So that's a bummer if this team doesn't end up making the playoffs and has a top 10 pick. Like, you're only going to get 2 of those 4 top 10 picks in those rounds. That's a little bit of a disappointment. And we also see how much Terry McLaurin means to this team. And now that he's been injured, the offense just looked terrible last night, even before Daniels went down. And again, tough matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. That defense deserves their flowers and credit. They're looking really, really good. But ultimately, I have Drake Maye ahead of Jayden Daniels at this point in Dynasty. I do want to put your mind in the future here a little bit and think about draft season next year for redraft. With the injuries that Jayden Daniels has suffered, right? I mean, last year he had the rib injury, he got banged up. This year he had the hamstring injury. Now he's got the elbow injury. Like, we're talking about injuries starting to pile up for him. And the way Jayden Daniels' body is set up, like, that is not the kind of body that's you can take hits. Like, you look at Lamar Jackson. And while Jayden Daniels is a great athlete, Lamar Jackson's twitchiness to me is better, right? I think he's a much more dangerous player with the ball in his hands, and Lamar avoids big hits. Now, Lamar's dealt with his injuries too, but Jayden, his body is just, it's even compared to Lamar's, it's still much more thinner and much more just not conducive to taking hits. And so, especially in the NFL, these guys are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. And so, I'm glad to see it wasn't major for Daniels. But I want to take your mind to next year though. And I want to think about, how does redraft set up for next year with the quarterbacks in fantasy football, right? You have Josh Allen, you have Lamar Jackson. That's going to probably be the 1 and 2 unless one of them suffer a major injury, fingers crossed, the rest of the season. Patrick Mahomes has started to insert himself into that too. There's a good chance Patrick Mahomes, with how he's looked this year, is kind of possibly even ahead of Lamar, is what people, depending on how the year finishes out. Those are probably your top 3 guys. Then you have Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Jayden Daniels. Not even talking about Drake Maye. Drake Maye probably jumps ahead of Jalen Hurts, in my opinion. And I think Drake May jumps ahead of Joe Burrow, right? So now you're talking about Drake May probably somewhere around QB4. So about QB4. So now Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, and Jalen Hurts, those three quarterbacks are likely going to be QB5, 6, and 7 off the board. That is a very real possibility. And that's a very stark difference from what we saw this year in these drafts, where it was Lamar, Allen, Jayden Daniels. Those are the top three. You have Jalen Hurts and then Joe Burrow kind of on the cusp there, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how draft season goes. And I think we're going to see quarterbacks going earlier next year, more quarterbacks going earlier next year than we did this year. And you look at a guy like Drake May, who, I mean, a lot of people on this channel talked about him as a guy that you should be drafting because of the value. I mean, this is a guy that was being drafted as between quarterback 10 and quarterback 12, sometimes even farther. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what the discount on Jayden Daniels will be for redraft next year. It is a very, very interesting discussion, something to keep in mind, for next year. I know people don't. We're in the middle of this year. I get it, but just remember this because it's going to be an interesting situation to see how that unfolds. Let's go move over to our last two segments. Again, if you guys have any questions, send them in. Mailbag. It could be, questions about Monday Night Football. If you have any start-sit decisions last minute here, if you have any trade questions, if you have questions about anything, just send it in here. I'll answer it at the end of the show, and we'll get you guys out of here. Let's move over to our final two segments, which are a little more fun. We're going to talk about trade deadline wishes here. Number one wish for me is Chris Olave going to the New England Patriots or the Denver Broncos, right? Both of these teams are such a good fit for Chris Olave. The New England Patriots, you have Stephon Diggs, right? It might feel like a little redundant because both really good route runners, him and Chris Olave. But Chris Olave is still much more explosive player, could fit really, really well in just that offense alone. They could use a nice bump up, a nice floor raiser in that offense, especially for a team that still has a lot of has a lot of cap space they can take on. They can extend him. And this is a team that if they think they're real contenders, they should probably add more pieces because they haven't played a tough schedule and they're going to play some offenses that are going to put up points and you're going to want to match that. Right. And so you might play some better defenses. You need more talent. That's just the bottom line. Denver Broncos, maybe a selfish thing for me, but I think Chris Olave would fit in phenomenal on this Denver Broncos offense. He fits in right next to Cortland Sutton as a 1-2 punch there. Then you have guys like Franklin, Pat Bryant, and Mims that could be more a lot of the rotational guys in and out. The only concern for me is Chris Olave and the blocking, but Troy Franklin's not the best blocker, and he's seen himself on the field, and it's a good talent spot there. Let's talk about the next guy, and it's Breece Hall. Would love to see Breece Hall go to the Chiefs or the Bears. I think those would be two awesome, awesome spots. The next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline realities and what we really think is going to happen. But these are just dreams and wishes, right? If you have any dreams and wishes, send them in the chat. Love to hear about them. But Breece Hall to the Chiefs and Breece Hall to the Bears. Those would be two really, really nice spots for him. We could get DeAndre Swift out of that lineup and, even Kyle Monangai and give Breece Hall, a nice offensive coordinator to play with and Ben Johnson and a nice weapon. You also could go to the Chiefs. That would be a lot of fun too. Jacoby Myers is the next guy. I think he is very likely on the move. He's been very vocal about wanting to be traded. I just don't really know why the Raiders would keep him at this point. Why have a guy that's been so vocal multiple times requesting a trade now? I just don't really get why you have him on the roster at that point and don't move him, especially for a team that's kind of sinking right now. I get it. You don't just trade everybody. And I'm going to talk about that in the next segment. You don't just trade guys to trade guys. You need talent still, even if you're at the deadline, even if your team stinks. But ultimately, you still look at Jacoby Myers. He could be a nice asset to a team like the Steelers and a team like the Patriots. We just talked about the Patriots. Familiarity with the offense, with the team, it makes a ton of sense going back there. I'm pretty sure Josh McDaniels was the OC when Jacoby Myers was there in the past. It might have been Bill O'Brien. I don't think it was Bill O'Brien though. I think it was Josh McDaniels. But Steelers make a lot of sense too. They really could use another weapon. Next to DK Metcalf, right? Having a kind of like a chain mover would be really nice. They're desperate for a second option there. Alvin Kamara would be another guy. Chiefs, Bears, we talked about that. Don't need to jump too deep into that. Rashid Shaheed, Chiefs, Bills, that would be fun. Just from a field stretcher standpoint. I think the Bills, they're always going to be on the market right now looking for additions. With the Chiefs, it's probably more of a wish than it is a reality because Marquise Brown has been a nice field stretcher for them. Xavier Worthy. So probably doesn't make a ton of sense from a redundancy standpoint. I just selfishly would really like to see it. And then lastly, and we'll move to the next segment, which is probably more going to throw some cold water on some of these. David Njoku going to the Bucks. I would love to see David Njoku in Tampa. Adam Schefter said it's a very real possibility. It's seeming more likely now that David Njoku is going to be moved. So I think Bucks would be awesome. I think the Broncos and the Bucks make a ton of sense. Broncos have been poking around. I think the Bucks are much more likely. Njoku from a fantasy aspect, selfishly, as a Broncos fan, I would love to see David Njoku in Denver. But from a fantasy aspect, give me David Njoku in Tampa Bay. That would be awesome. Awesome, 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 awesome for fantasy. I would have no concerns of Baker Mayfield getting him the football. I think that would be great for fantasy. I would love to see that. Let's move on to our last segment here, and it's trade deadline realities. And we got to be honest, guys, that we get to this point of the year, and a lot of people, a lot of rumors get thrown out there. It's not really happening. A.J. Brown, not getting traded. Brian Thomas Jr., not getting traded. Why would the Jaguars trade Brian Thomas Jr. after a 1,300-yard season because he's having a down year with drops? As a rookie last year, coming into this year, he's cost controlled. I don't care what's going on over there. It makes zero sense. That trade rumor was always malarkey, and you have to kind of see the forest of the trees because the God's honest truth is a lot of these deals are not going to happen. It's going to be most teams, even bad teams, are not giving up good talent unless they're getting teams to pay a ton, which teams are just not willing to overpay right now. It just hasn't been that way for the last couple of years. Von Miller was traded for a really nice deal to the Rams. He helped them win that Super Bowl. Bradley Chubb for the Broncos was traded for a first-round pick. We've seen some guys get moved. Amari Cooper was nothing when he got moved, right? A lot of the guys that get moved are just damaged goods. That's just the reality, or else their teams would want to keep them. Now, trade deadline realities, Jacoby Myers to the Steelers, Patriots, I think that is very, very real. I think that's a very real possibility. I would bet that he is moved. That is very, very real, and we would like that for fantasy. That would be awesome. I think preferably I would like that for more of the Steelers than I would the Patriots, but at the same time, Patriots probably going to put up more points. It's just more target competition with the Patriots. Rashid Shaheed, I think, is a very real possibility. Probably not the Chiefs, though. Very, very more likely a team like the Bills. You could see that. Maybe a team like the Jaguars, who just lose Brian Thomas. Just lose Travis Hunter. Are they real? Are they for real? I don't know. I don't think the Jaguars are for real, to be completely honest with you, but whatever. David Njoku, I think, is a very real possibility to go to the Bucks or the Broncos. Alvin Kamara, he's probably staying home. I don't think he's moving anywhere. Breece Hall, staying home. I don't think Breece Hall is being moved. I've been one very vocal to say that. I don't think Breece Hall is moved. And Chris Olave probably not being moved as well. Just don't expect that. What we're probably going to get is a guy like Jerome Ford is going to be traded. A Tony Pollard might get traded. Those could be interesting moves, right? Tony Pollard or Jerome Ford are probably the guys that one of the Chiefs probably maybe acquire. Like that would be very likely. Or one of those guys goes to the Chargers because Hampton, the reports coming out that, he at the earliest he's going to come back is after the bye. And that's at the earliest, which makes me think that there's a real possibility he doesn't come back even the first week after the bye. So we'll see, but those are probably the more likely trades that you see end up happening. whatever. Trade deadline's always a little bit of a disappointment every year, guys. So I'm sorry to throw cold water on you there. But we'll check out the chat real quick, and then we'll get out of here, see if we have any questions. Cowboys Uncovered said Cowboys will dominate tonight. They should. They absolutely should. It should be a fun night for points. I think that's going to be the nice thing, is just sit back and see a lot of points scored for fantasy, which will be great for us. Pouring Henny said, as someone with Stroud and Jayden Daniels in a superflex league, should I trade Vidal for Fields or Penix or neither? I'm debating hard on my only waiver option is literally Geno or Cam Ward. I wouldn't trade Vidal for Fields. I would rather trade him for Penix. I think Penix's job is safer rest of the season. Honestly, though, I think I'd rather hold on to Vidal and go pick up Geno Smith. Geno Smith's going to have a tough time this week, probably with Denver. I don't want Cam Ward. I'm assuming this sounds like it's not a dynasty, but that would be what I would do. Vidal is probably in line to be the starter for another couple weeks. You're 7-2. It's 4-point passing. I'm pretty set at running back, wide receiver only. I mean, my only healthy quarterback is Dart at the moment. I thought you had Jayden Daniels. You said you had Jayden Daniels too. Maybe Daniels is the other backup that you might have to put in there with so Jackson Dart is probably the only backup that you might have to Daniels. If that's the case, I'm fine with rolling out Jackson Dart, Stroud, and picking up Geno on waivers and holding on to Vidal. You don't want to give up Vidal. I would see if you can get something better for Vidal. Hope Dobbs goes to Washington so bad. Yeah, I could see that. Jacoby to Washington. I don't know. I just don't know if the Washington Commanders are going to be buyers right now with Daniels hurt. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't think so. Not redraft, not dynasty, a redraft. That's what I thought. You have Daniel Stroud and Dart. Yeah. I mean, Stroud concussion. I get it. I think I'd still rather roll out Vidal. Maybe you can package up Vidal and one of these quarterbacks to get a better quarterback, like a Sam Darnold. Maybe you can package up Stroud and Vidal for Darnold. Like I would try for that. I would rather just pick up Geno, to be completely honest with you. Juicy Almond said, should I trade Drake London for Derrick Henry and Pittman? Context is important here. Derrick Henry does have a nice schedule coming up, to keep that in mind. But I think ultimately I'd probably rather keep Drake London here. Running backs, a reminder, Stevenson. Yeah, okay. Yeah, if you have Stevenson, Kenneth Walker, and Nick Chubb, I'm okay with that then. I might rather get a better running back though than Derrick Henry or Pittman, just a much more stable guy. So that would be the route that I would go. I'd try to see if I can get somebody better. Galaxy Picker said, would you rather move Addison or Adunze for a running back very thin? I'd rather move Addison. Adunze's schedule is still really, really good going forward. I know Adunze was a blank for us, but that would be the route that I would go. Yeah, no, appreciate that. Appreciate the comments and the questions here. He has A-Chain. I don't think he would do it. Yeah, I mean, Drake London for A-Chain is a pretty fair deal, I would say. I mean, I think that's a pretty fair 1-for-1. Drake London just had 3 touchdowns, and A-Chain's on a spiraling offense right now that we have no idea what the future holds. Mike McDaniels, I don't think he's going to be fired, but he could be. And if McDaniels is fired, there's a chance that this offense doesn't feature A-Chain as much and as creatively as we've seen in the past. So we'll see how it goes. Stroud doesn't play this last week. I'll just eat it and move forward, hoping Vidal. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just think Vidal is going to be in line to get a couple more starts here, because it sounds like Hampton's going to miss more time than expected. It's not just going to be, hey, he come off IR, he's coming back. I think there's a possibility he misses. He waits until like the last week, which I think it's 21 days is the practice window where you can get activated. So it's 4 weeks plus 21 days. So you figure about 7 weeks. I think it's possible he misses actually 6 to 7 is very likely. And yeah, I know it is tough to trade for running backs. It is tough. Definitely get that. It's not easy in my leagues either. People don't want to trade with me, to be completely honest with you. Drop Tootin for Parker Washington or Pierce or Douglas or Brown. It really depends on your roster stuff. I'm not going to pick up Pop Douglas. I mean, Boutte injured, but Pop Douglas will be out there. Pop Douglas will be available. Parker Washington's will be available. Diami Browns, Alec Pierce, those guys will be available. Parker Washington is the guy that you want to pick up, though, if you're going to drop Tootin for anybody. It's just wide receivers. You can find these kinds of players that you can flex. Like, it's much easier. It's harder to find the running backs, in these situations. Giants backfield. We talked about that. Go back, guys. We talked about that. It was like probably at the 5-minute mark. I covered that. We talked about Singletary being an ad last week, but I did go over that. So just go back and watch that. And then your receiving core being Ladd, Addison, Puka, Garrett Wilson. Should I try trading Puka or Wilson for a running back? My running backs are Gibbs, and Tracy and Pacheco. Yeah, you should go get a running back. That's tough sledding. I'd rather move Wilson. To be honest with you, he's the guy that's currently injured. Both guys are injured. I think Wilson, we still don't know when he's coming back. Could be this week, but we'll see. What else do we got here? What else? Last question here, and then we'll get out. Ripped a lot of people off so many times in my league last couple of years, and this year they don't want to trade with me at all, even if it sounds too good for them. Yeah, I'm sure people listening on the audio side can relate. Once you kind of have done well in your fantasy leagues and people think that you are tapped in, it makes trading a lot harder. Trade relationships are so underrated, though. I'll tell you, like, if you can help a guy out where it's not like you're not colluding, but it's like, hey, like, you don't really need this depth piece. It's like a Pop Douglas, right? Somebody needs Pop Douglas because they've got injuries and it's a deeper league. You go send Pop Douglas to somebody for like fab, right? Like, or you do some smaller moves and say, hey, I'll help you out this week. I'm not going to rake you over the coals on a trade. Again, not colluding, but just saying, hey, like, how can I help you out? It goes a long way. It makes trades much easier, in my opinion, in some of the leagues I've been in with guys for a long time. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for being here. Very, very much appreciated. Make sure you hit like and subscribe to us if you're not already, and enjoy the games.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.